60 miles per gallon, from an American car in 1952. While Cadillacs were gulping gas at 10 miles per gallon and the average family sedan struggled to break 15, there was a fastback coupe from Toledo, Ohio that could drive from New York to Chicago on less than 13 gallons of gas. The catch? Its windshield wipers literally stopped working when you pressed the accelerator. Picture this. It's March 1952, and you're standing in a Willys dealership. The Korean War has been raging for 2 years. Gas rationing is a real possibility. Detroit's building land yachts with V8s that drink fuel like it's going out of style. And here's this sleek, almost European-looking fastback that promises to triple your fuel economy. The salesman isn't lying. But he's also not mentioning that every time it rains, you'll have to choose between maintaining speed and seeing where you're going. This is the story of the Willys Aero, the most fuel-efficient American car of the 1950s, an engineering marvel wrapped in a comedy of cost-cutting and quite possibly the most frustrating car to drive in the rain ever sold in America. It proved Detroit could build fuel-efficient cars when it wanted to. It also proved why Detroit usually didn't want to. To understand why Willys Overland, the company that built Jeeps for World War II, suddenly decided to create America's most aerodynamic passenger car, we need to rewind to 1950. The automotive landscape was insane. General Motors controlled 45% of the market. Ford had another 24%. Chrysler held 21%. That left 10% for everyone else: Studebaker, Nash, Hudson, Packard, Kaiser Frazer, and Willys Overland, to fight over like dogs scraping for table scraps. Willys had survived the Depression and thrived during World War II by building 363,000 Jeeps for the military. After the war, they kept making civilian Jeeps and station wagons, rugged, practical vehicles. But by 1950, Jeep sales were falling. Americans wanted style, comfort, automatic transmissions. They wanted to forget the war, not drive reminders of it. Ward Canaday, Willys' chairman, knew they needed a modern passenger car or they'd die. But here's the problem. Willys had maybe $10 million for development. General Motors spent that much on ashtrays. They couldn't compete on size, power, or luxury. They needed an angle nobody else was pursuing. That's when Chief Engineer Clyde Payton had an epiphany. What if they didn't try to build a better American car? What if they built an American Volkswagen? The small car market was exploding. Volkswagen sold 2,000 Beetles in America in 1950. By 1952, it was 20,000. Nash was succeeding with the compact Rambler. Henry J. was selling basic transportation, but nobody was combining European size with American style and genuinely revolutionary fuel economy. Payton convinced Canaday this was their niche. Build a car that looked like it belonged at a country club, but sipped gas like a European economy car. The engineering brief was impossible. It had to be beautiful enough to compete with Detroit's offerings, cheap enough to build profitably in small numbers, light enough to perform acceptably with minimal power, and aerodynamic enough to achieve fuel economy that would make headlines. Oh, and they had 18 months and $7 million to do it. The design came from an unexpected source. Phil Wright, an independent designer who'd penned custom bodies for Willys Aero in the 1930s, had been shopping a fastback design to manufacturers since 1946. Everyone rejected it. Too radical, too European, too expensive to tool. Willys bought it for a fraction of what Detroit paid for designs because they were desperate, and Wright was tired of rejection. The body was revolutionary by American standards. The Aero had a 0.40 drag coefficient. For perspective, a 1952 Cadillac had a drag coefficient of 0.55. A modern Toyota Camry is about 0.28. The Aero was more aerodynamic than any American production car of its era. The fastback roofline, integrated fenders, and smooth underbody weren't just styling. They were functional aerodynamics when nobody in Detroit cared about air resistance. The chassis was pure simplicity. A 108-inch wheelbase, 13 inches shorter than a Chevrolet. Four-wheel independent suspension? Too expensive. They used a solid front axle with coil springs and a live rear axle with semi-elliptic leaf springs. Basic, proven, cheap. The frame was a simple ladder design weighing just 285 pounds. Every pound saved meant better fuel economy and performance. But the real magic was the weight, or lack of it. The Aero weighed 2,400 pounds. A 1952 Chevrolet weighed 3,100 pounds. A Buick Special tipped the scales at 3,600 pounds. Willys achieved this through obsessive weight reduction. The body panels were 20-gauge steel instead of the industry-standard 18-gauge. The glass was thinner. The seats used less padding. Even the horn was smaller. Engineers calculated that every 100 pounds saved meant 2 miles per gallon improvement. Under the hood was the F-head 6-cylinder engine. Let me explain what F-head means because it's weird even by 1950 standards. The intake valves were in the head, operated by push rods and rocker arms like a modern engine, but the exhaust valves were in the block like a flathead. This hybrid design was supposed to combine the breathing advantages of overhead valves with the simplicity of side valves. In reality, it combined the complexity of both with the advantages of neither. The engine displaced 161 cubic inches, 2.6 liters, in modern terms. Compression ratio was 6.9.1, pathetic even by 1952 standards, when Oldsmobile was running 8.1. The L-head version made 72 horsepower at 4,000 RPM. The F-head made 75 horsepower. Willys claimed the export high-compression version made 90 horsepower, but that required fuel that didn't exist at American pumps. Most Aeros sold in America made 68-72 horsepower. A contemporary Chevrolet 6 made 92 horsepower. The Buick Straight 8 made 120. But here's where it gets interesting. That anemic engine only had to move 2,400 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was actually comparable to heavier cars with more power. And the F-head's torque curve was remarkably flat. It made 55% of peak torque at just 800 RPM, perfect for low-speed economy driving. The engine would pull smoothly from 10 mph in high gear without lugging. The transmission choices were fascinating. The standard 3-speed manual had ratios chosen for economy, not performance. First gear was 2.97.1, second was 1.55.1, third was direct drive. But the optional Borg-Warner Overdrive was the secret weapon. It had a 0.70.1 ratio that kicked in automatically at 27 mph. At 60 mph with overdrive engaged, the engine was turning just 2,100 RPM. A Chevrolet at the same speed was spinning at 3,200 RPM. The overdrive unit was mechanical genius. A centrifugal governor, electrical solenoid, and freewheeling clutch worked together without driver input. Hit 27 mph, lift off the gas momentarily, and it engaged with a subtle click. The fuel economy improvement was dramatic, 25–30% better on the highway. The overdrive added $85 to the car's price. In today's money, that's about $950 for a 30% fuel economy improvement. Now, about those windshield wipers. This wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate cost-cutting that became the Aero's most infamous feature. The wipers were vacuum-operated, powered by engine manifold vacuum. When you pressed the accelerator, manifold vacuum dropped, and the wipers slowed or stopped completely. Floor it, and they'd park themselves mid-windshield until you lifted off. Willys knew this was a problem. Electric wipers existed. They just cost $12 more per car. When you're trying to build a car for $1,725 and make a profit, $12 matters. They rationalized that it rarely rained hard enough to matter. Owners disagreed, violently. The vacuum wipers became such a joke that aftermarket electric wiper conversion kits sold briskly. Cost? $24. Twice what Willys saved. The interior was austere, but not primitive. The seats were vinyl over horsehair padding, no springs to save weight and cost. The dashboard was painted metal with chrome trim strips. The instruments were basic: speedometer, fuel gauge, temperature gauge, oil pressure light. No clock, no cigarette lighter standard. Even the dome light was optional. But the visibility was extraordinary. The greenhouse was massive, with thin pillars and acres of glass. You could see everything except directly behind through that fastback window. The Aero launched in January 1952 at a base price of $1,731. A Chevrolet cost $1,696. On paper, paying more for less power seemed insane, but Willys had an ace card: fuel economy that destroyed everything else with 4 wheels and a roof. The EPA didn't exist in 1952, so fuel economy testing was Wild West territory. But Popular Science, Mechanics Illustrated, and Motor Trend all tested the Aero independently. The results were consistent and shocking. City driving, 25-30 miles per gallon. Highway cruising at 50 mph, 45-50 miles per gallon. One hypermiling test by Popular Science achieved 63.4 miles per gallon at a steady 30 mph. A Chevrolet of the same era got 15 city, 20 highway on a good day. Tom McCahill, America's most influential automotive journalist, drove an Aero from New York to Detroit. He averaged 47.3 miles per gallon at normal highway speeds. His conclusion? If gas goes to 50 cents a gallon, Willys will own America. Gas was 27 cents a gallon. It wouldn't hit 50 cents until 1974. The aerodynamics were a huge factor. Wind resistance increases with the square of velocity. At 60 mph, the Aero's slippery shape meant the engine worked significantly less hard than a conventional sedan's. The low weight meant less rolling resistance. The tall gearing meant the engine barely worked at cruise. Everything combined into economy figures that wouldn't be matched by American cars until the 1980s. But the Aero wasn't just about economy. Willys offered fascinating variants. The Aero Wing was a 2-door hardtop, arguably America's first pillarless compact coupe. The Aero Lark was a luxurious trim level with 2-tone paint and actual carpet. The Aero Ace was the stripper model, making the base car look luxurious. The Aero Eagle was the range topper with a Continental spare tire kit and chrome everything. Performance was relative. 0 to 60 took 22 seconds with the standard engine, 19 seconds with the optional F-head. Top speed was 78 mph, though you wouldn't want to be there long. But here's the thing. In 1952, America, with speed limits of 45-50 mph on most highways, who cared? The Aero could cruise all day at 50 mph, returning 45 miles per gallon, while contemporary cars were sucking down fuel at twice the rate. The handling was surprisingly good. The low weight meant less momentum in corners. The 108-inch wheelbase was nimble in city traffic. The steering was slow, 4.5 turns lock-to-lock, but accurate. Road and Track called it European in feel, which was high praise in 1952. The brakes were adequate. 9-inch drums all around stopped 2,400 pounds without drama, though they'd fade after repeated hard stops. The 1952 model year saw 31,363 Aeros built. Not bad for a new model from a tiny company, but problems emerged immediately. Build quality was inconsistent. Toledo Assembly hadn't built passenger cars in years. Panel gaps varied wildly. Some cars leaked in rain, others had wind noise that made conversation impossible at highway speeds. The thin body panels dented if you looked at them wrong. The paint, applied in Willys' ancient facility, often showed through to primer within a year. The 1953 model got upgrades. The F-head engine became standard, now making 90 horsepower with higher compression. A new rear axle ratio improved acceleration. The spring rates were softened for better ride quality. They even offered power steering, making the Aero one of the smallest cars ever with that feature. But the vacuum wipers remained. Electric wipers were now optional for $15, but penny-pinching buyers still chose vacuum units. Sales improved to 41,000 units in 1953. But storm clouds gathered. Henry Kaiser, who'd been trying to succeed in automobiles since 1945, bought Willys Overland in March 1953 for $62 million. He didn't want the Aero, he wanted Jeep. The passenger car was an unwanted stepchild in the merger. Kaiser promised to continue Aero production, but his heart wasn't in it. The 1954 Aero got a facelift. A new grille, revised taillights, and Continental spare tire kit tried to add visual bulk to the lightweight design. The engine got another compression boost to 7.6.1, now making 90 horsepower on regular fuel. They added an optional Hydra-matic automatic transmission from General Motors, though it destroyed fuel economy, dropping highway mileage to 25 MPG. But 1954 was a bloodbath for independent manufacturers. Ford and Chevrolet started a price war that destroyed profit margins. A new Chevrolet now cost $1,600. The Aero, with less power and those damned vacuum wipers, cost $1,185. Sales collapsed to 11,000 units. Kaiser Willys pulled the plug. The Toledo factory would build Jeeps exclusively. The Aero dies and plans were sold to Brazil, where Willys Overland do Brazil built versions until 1971. The numbers tell the Aero's story. Total production, 91,000 units over 3 model years. Development cost, $7 million. Unit cost, roughly $100 to build. Sold for $1,720. Profit per unit, maybe $200 on a good day. Return on investment, negative. Willys lost money on every Aero when you factored in development costs. They needed 150,000 units to break even. They built 91,000. The engineering legacy is more complex. The Aero proved Americans could build fuel-efficient cars. Its aerodynamic efficiency wouldn't be matched by American manufacturers for decades. The weight reduction techniques influenced later compacts. The Overdrive transmission showed the value of tall gearing for economy. Even the vacuum wiper debacle taught a lesson: never compromise essential functions for minor cost savings. But the market reality was brutal. Americans in 1952 didn't care about fuel economy. Gas was cheap. Credit was easy. The economy was booming. Why buy a small, underpowered car to save $200 a year on gas when you could finance a Buick and look successful? The Aero was a solution to a problem that wouldn't exist for another 20 years. The Aero's competition made more sense to buyers. The Henry J was cheaper and simpler. The Nash Rambler was better built with a modern overhead valve engine. The imported Volkswagen Beetle was even more economical and had personality. The Aero fell into a strange middle ground. Too expensive to be basic transportation, too basic to be aspirational, too American to be an import alternative. Let's talk about those who actually bought Aeros. They were eccentrics, pragmatists, and contrarians. Rural mail carriers loved them. The fuel economy meant more profit per route. Traveling salesmen who paid for their own gas became converts. Depression survivors who remembered 10-cent per gallon gas being expensive bought them as insurance against future price spikes. Engineers bought them to study the aerodynamics. None of these were large demographics. The owner experience was mixed. The fuel economy delivered as promised. Owners routinely reported 40-plus MPG highway, 25-plus city. The reliability was decent once you fixed the factory quality issues. The F-head engine, despite its odd design, was basically indestructible if you changed the oil. The Overdrive transmission rarely failed. But those wipers. Every owner story includes rain, traffic, and the choice between motion and vision. Willys tried to address the wiper situation without admitting fault. The 1953 owner's manual included a full page on vacuum wiper operation, explaining that slowing was normal under acceleration. They suggested planning ahead in rain and allowing extra following distance. They even claimed vacuum wipers were safer because they encouraged slower wet weather driving. Owners weren't buying it, literally or figuratively. The aftermarket stepped in where Willys wouldn't. Trico sold electric wiper conversion kits specifically for the Aero. J.C. Whitney offered electric wiper motors that bolted directly to Aero mounting points. Local mechanics would convert vacuum systems to electric for $30–40. Some owners got creative, installing foot-operated manual wipers from military Jeeps or hand-cranked units from 1930s cars. Anything was better than vacuum. The Brazilian chapter is fascinating. Willys Overland do Brazil bought the tooling and rights for $675,000 in 1954. They built Aeros until 1971, selling over 110,000 units. The Brazilian version got continuous improvements American cars never saw. Overhead valve conversions boosted power to 110 horsepower. Disc brakes improved stopping. Electric wipers were standard from day one. The Brazilian Aero evolved into a genuinely good car, proving the basic design was sound. The survival rate is surprisingly high. Of 91,000 built, an estimated 501,000 survive in various conditions. The simple engineering means they're easy to keep running. The F-head engine parts interchange with Jeep CJ engines built through 1971. The transmission is a standard Borg-Warner unit with available parts. Everything except body panels can be sourced or fabricated. The vacuum wipers? Every surviving car has been converted to electric. Collectors have discovered the Aero recently. Values remained flat for decades. You could buy a perfect one for $5,000 in 2010. Today, a pristine Aero wing hardtop can bring $25,000. Even basic four-door sedans in good condition sell for $10,000–, $15,000. The rarity, unusual engineering, and fuel economy story appeal to collectors tired of conventional 1950s iron. The hypermiling community has adopted the Aero as a patron saint. Modern enthusiasts have pushed the envelope further than Willys imagined. Using modern low-rolling resistance tires, synthetic lubricants, and careful tuning, they've achieved 70-plus MPG at steady speeds. One owner claimed 81.3 MPG on a carefully controlled run at 35 mph. Even driven normally with modern techniques, 50 mpg highway is routine. The racing history is thin, but interesting. Aeros ran in Mexican road races where lightweight and fuel efficiency mattered more than power. A few competed in economy runs, consistently winning their class. One privateer entered an Aero in the 1953 Mobile Gas Economy run from Los Angeles to Sun Valley, Idaho. It achieved 38.9 mpg over mountains and deserts, beating every American car except another Aero. Not bad for 68 horsepower and vacuum wipers. Kaiser's decision to kill the Aero looks foolish in hindsight. Gas prices tripled during the 1973 oil crisis. Suddenly, everyone wanted fuel-efficient cars. Japanese manufacturers who'd been building Aero-sized cars all along ate Detroit's lunch. If Kaiser had continued developing the Aero, improving quality and adding electric wipers, Willys might have owned the compact market when it exploded. Instead, they focused on Jeeps, which turned out fine eventually, but missed a massive opportunity. The technical influence lived on. The 1959 Studebaker Lark used similar weight reduction techniques. The 1960 Chevrolet Corvair copied the fastback aerodynamics. The 1962 Chevy 2 featured an overhead cam engine option, partly inspired by Willys' F-head experiments. Even the vacuum wiper fiasco influenced design. It became the textbook example of penny-wise, pound-foolish cost-cutting in engineering schools. Modern engineers studying the Aero are impressed by what Willys achieved with $7 million and slide rules. The aerodynamics were genuinely advanced. The weight reduction was systematic and scientific. The powertrain optimization for economy over performance was decades ahead of its time. If you gave modern engineers the same brief, maximum economy, minimum cost, 1950s technology, they'd probably create something similar, just with electric wipers. The environmental angle is intriguing. An Aero getting 45 MPG in 1952 produced less CO2 per mile than a 2010 Chevrolet Suburban getting 20 MPG. If every American car in 1952 had achieved Aero-level fuel economy, we'd have saved roughly 2 billion gallons of gasoline annually. That's 20 million tons of CO2 not released. Willys was accidentally green before green was cool. So what killed the Aero? Not vacuum wipers, though they didn't help. Not lack of power. The Volkswagen Beetle had less and sold millions. Not ugly styling. It was actually attractive. The Aero died because it was the right car at the wrong time, built by the wrong company, sold to the wrong market. Americans in 1952 wanted excess, not efficiency. They wanted to forget wartime rationing, not prepare for future shortages. The story gets philosophical when you consider what the Aero represented. It was American engineering solving the wrong problem brilliantly. Willys created perhaps the most fuel-efficient closed car in the world in 1952. They did it with a tiny budget, ancient facilities, and desperate creativity. The engineering was sound, the execution was decent, the timing was catastrophically wrong. Every time gas prices spike, someone rediscovers the Aero and writes about this forgotten economy car that was ahead of its time. But was it? Or was it exactly of its time, a perfect response to conditions that didn't actually exist? The Korean War never triggered serious gas rationing. The post-war boom made thrift seem unpatriotic. The Aero was built for an austerity that never came. The lesson isn't that Willys was wrong to build the Aero, it's that being right doesn't matter if your timing is wrong. The Aero proved American manufacturers could build world-class economy cars in 1952. It also proved they had absolutely no reason to. The market wanted power, size, chrome, and status. Willys offered efficiency, economy, and vacuum wipers. Guess which one? Today, when every manufacturer obsesses over fuel economy, aerodynamics, and weight reduction, the Aero looks prophetic. Its 0-40 drag coefficient beats many modern SUVs. Its 2,400-pound weight embarrasses current compact cars weighing 3,500 pounds. Its 45 MPG highway figure matches modern hybrids. Willys engineers in 1952, working with carburetors and steel, achieved what modern engineers need computers and composites to accomplish. But here's the beautiful irony. The Aero's greatest failure, those vacuum wipers, became its defining characteristic. Nobody remembers the aerodynamics or weight savings. Everyone remembers the wipers that quit when you needed them most. It's the perfect metaphor for the car itself. Brilliant engineering undermined by one spectacular miscalculation. The Willys Aero deserved better. It deserved electric wipers, obviously. It deserved better build quality. It deserved a market that valued efficiency over excess. It deserved an owner who believed in it instead of Kaiser, who saw it as an unwanted stepchild. Most of all, it deserved to be remembered as more than just that weird car with the vacuum wipers. Because when you strip away the jokes and look at what Willys achieved, it's remarkable. They built a car that got 60 miles per gallon highway in 1952. They did it with conventional technology, just applied intelligently. They proved efficiency didn't require sacrifice. The Aero was comfortable, reasonably quick, and attractive. They just proved it to an audience that wasn't listening. The last Aero rolled off the Toledo line in April 1955. No ceremony, no fanfare. The workers were already retooling for expanded Jeep production. The dies were crated and shipped to Brazil. The engineering drawings went into filing cabinets. The dream of an American economy car died quietly, killed by prosperity and cheap gasoline. But 91,000 Aeros were built. Each got those incredible fuel economy figures. Each proved a point, even if nobody cared. Each represented a road not taken by the American auto industry, and each, Every single one had those damn vacuum windshield wipers that stopped working when you pressed the gas. What's your take on the Willys Aero, engineering triumph or economy car curiosity? Have you ever seen one of these rare fuel sippers in person? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear if anyone's actually driven one in the rain. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into America's most efficient forgotten car, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started exploring the wild engineering dead ends and brilliant failures of automotive history. Until next time, keep those wipers electric.